"You don't even belong here." That's what my mother-in-law said to me at the New Year's Eve dinner table, loud enough for everyone to hear. I felt my chest tighten, my hands go cold under the table, but I kept my face still. I didn't cry. I didn't answer back. I just sat there looking at my plate, while the whole family pretended they didn't hear what she just said. My name is Maya. I'm 28 years old, and I've been married to Derek for 3 years now. When we first started dating, he warned me that his mom could be difficult. He said she had strong opinions and that she was protective of him. I thought that was normal. I thought I could handle it. I even thought that maybe, with time, she'd see that I loved her son and that I was good for him. I was wrong about all of it. The first time I met her, she looked me up and down like she was inspecting something she didn't want to buy. She didn't smile. She didn't hug me. She just said, "So you're the one," and turned to Derek like I wasn't even standing there anymore. I tried to laugh it off. I told myself she was just being a protective mom, but deep down, I felt it. That coldness, that rejection, and it never went away. After we got engaged, things got worse. She started making comments about everything. My hair, my job, the way I dressed, the way I cooked. She'd show up at our apartment unannounced, walking in like she still owned the place, opening cabinets, rearranging things, telling me that Derek liked things done a certain way, and that I still had a lot to learn. I'd smile and nod, biting my tongue so hard I could taste blood. Derek would tell me to ignore her. He'd say, "That's just how she is," or "She means well, babe." But I knew better. She didn't mean well. She meant to remind me every single day that I wasn't good enough for her son. The passive-aggressive comments became a routine. "Oh, you're wearing that?" she'd say when I showed up to family dinners. Or, "I brought some real food for Derek. I know he misses home cooking." She'd say it with a smile, but the message was clear. I wasn't wife material. I wasn't mother material. I wasn't her material. And every time I tried to stand up for myself, Derek would ask me to let it go. "She's my mom, Maya. Just give her time." So I gave her time. 3 years of it. 3 years of swallowing my pride, of pretending I didn't hear the little digs, of acting like it didn't hurt when she excluded me from family photos or forgot to mention my name when talking about Derek's life. 3 years of watching her treat me like a guest in my own marriage. But that New Year's Eve dinner, something inside me finally cracked. It was supposed to be special. Derek and I had just found out I was pregnant. We hadn't told anyone yet, but we were planning to announce it that night. I was nervous but excited. I thought maybe, just maybe, this would change things. Maybe becoming a grandmother would soften her. Maybe she'd finally see me as part of the family. We arrived at her house around 6. The whole family was there. Derek's 2 sisters, his dad, his aunts and uncles, his cousins, and even his grandmother Margaret, who I'd only met a few times, but who had always been kind to me. The table was set beautifully. Candles, flowers, the good china. It looked like something out of a magazine. I brought a dessert I'd spent all afternoon making, a pecan pie because I knew it was Derek's favorite. When I handed it to my mother-in-law, she barely looked at it. She just said, "Oh, you didn't have to," in that tone that really meant, "I wish you hadn't." Dinner started fine. People were talking, laughing, sharing stories about the year. I was sitting next to Derek, holding his hand under the table, feeling hopeful. But then my mother-in-law stood up to make a toast. She raised her glass and started talking about family, about tradition, about how grateful she was to have everyone together. She thanked her husband. She thanked her daughters. She thanked the cousins. She even thanked the dog. But she didn't thank me. She didn't even look at me. And when Derek squeezed my hand, trying to comfort me, I knew he felt it too. The deliberate erasure, the cruelty of it. After the toast, people went back to eating and talking. I tried to shake it off. I tried to focus on the fact that soon we'd share our news and maybe that would change everything. But then she started again. This time, it was about the pie. She cut into it, took one bite, and said loud enough for the whole table to hear, "Well, it's a little dry, but I'm sure you tried your best." A few people laughed nervously. Derek's sister looked at me with pity. I just nodded and said, "I'll do better next time." But she wasn't done. She turned to Derek and said, "You know, your father's mother used to make the best pecan pie. I have the recipe somewhere. I should give it to someone who actually knows how to follow directions." The table went quiet. Derek opened his mouth to say something, but before he could, his grandmother Margaret spoke up. She said, "Linda, that's enough." Her voice was calm but firm. My mother-in-law laughed it off, saying she was just joking, but I could see the discomfort in everyone's eyes. They all knew it wasn't a joke. I excused myself to go to the bathroom. I needed air. I needed space. I stood in front of the mirror, gripping the sink, telling myself not to cry. Not here, not in her house. I could hear the muffled voices from the dining room, the clinking of glasses, the sound of people pretending everything was fine. I took a deep breath, fixed my face, and walked back out. When I sat down, the conversation had shifted. People were talking about resolutions, about plans for the new year. Derek's sister mentioned that she and her husband were thinking about buying a house. My mother-in-law immediately jumped in with advice, offering to help, saying how excited she was. Then Derek cleared his throat. He looked at me, smiled, and said, "Actually, we have some news too." I could feel my heart racing. This was it. This was the moment that would change everything. But before he could finish, my mother-in-law cut him off. She looked directly at me and said, "Let me guess. You're finally going back to school? Getting a real career?" The table went silent again. I felt my face burn. Derek's hand tightened around mine. I opened my mouth to respond, but she kept going. "I mean, it's about time, don't you think? You can't just live off my son forever." Her voice was sweet, but the words were venom. And this time people didn't laugh. They just stared. Shocked, uncomfortable, embarrassed for me. I don't know what came over me, but I stood up. I looked at her, really looked at her, and I said, "I have a career. I'm a registered nurse. I work overnight shifts at the hospital saving lives while you sit here judging people. But you've never once asked me about my job, have you? You've never asked me anything about myself, because you don't care. You just want me gone." My voice didn't shake. It didn't crack. I said it clearly, calmly, and I watched her face go pale. Derek stood up next to me, putting his hand on my shoulder. "Mom, Maya's right. You've been treating her like garbage since day one, and I've let it slide because I didn't want to cause problems. But I'm done. We're done. If you can't respect my wife, then you don't get to be part of our life." I could see the shock in his mother's eyes. She wasn't used to him standing up to her. She opened her mouth to argue, but before she could, his grandmother stood up too. Margaret walked slowly around the table until she was standing right in front of my mother-in-law. She looked at her daughter with so much sadness in her eyes, and then she turned to me. "Maya, I am so sorry," she said, her voice shaking. "I raised her better than this. I thought I did, but somewhere along the way she became someone I don't recognize, someone cruel, and I am ashamed." Tears were running down her face. She reached for my hand and held it gently. "You are a beautiful, strong woman, and my grandson is lucky to have you. I hope you can forgive this family for failing you." I didn't know what to say. I just nodded, tears finally spilling over. Margaret turned back to her daughter and said, "Linda, you owe this girl an apology, a real one. Not your fake politeness, a real, honest apology. Because if you don't, you're going to lose your son, and you're going to deserve it." The room was completely silent. You could hear the clock ticking on the wall. My mother-in-law looked around the table, seeing the disappointment on everyone's faces. Her husband wouldn't even look at her. Her daughters were shaking their heads. She had nowhere to hide. She turned to me, and for the first time, I saw something other than contempt in her eyes. I saw fear. Fear of being alone. Fear of being wrong. She opened her mouth, and in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "I'm sorry. It wasn't much. It wasn't enough, but it was something." I didn't respond. I just took Derek's hand, and we walked out of that house together. We spent New Year's Eve alone in our apartment, eating takeout and talking about the future, about our baby, about boundaries, about the kind of family we wanted to build. And for the first time in 3 years, I felt free. Free from the weight of trying to prove myself to someone who would never see me. Free from the silence I'd been carrying. Free to be exactly who I was. The next morning, Derek's grandmother called. She asked if she could come over, and I said yes. When she arrived, she hugged me for a long time and then sat down at our kitchen table. She told me stories about her own mother-in-law, about how hard it had been, about how she wished someone had stood up for her the way Derek stood up for me. She said she was proud of me, that I had more strength than she ever did. And then she said something I'll never forget. She said, "Sometimes the people who hurt us the most are the ones who are most afraid of being replaced. Linda saw how much Derek loves you, and it scared her. But that's her problem to fix, not yours." Over the next few weeks, my mother-in-law tried to reach out. She sent texts. She called. She even showed up at our door once, but Derek told her we needed space. He told her that if she wanted to be part of our lives, she had to prove she could change. Not with words, but with actions. And honestly, I don't know if she ever will. But I also know that it doesn't matter anymore, because I finally learned that I don't need her approval. I don't need her love. I have Derek. I have our baby on the way. I have Margaret, who treats me like the granddaughter she never had. And I have myself, the version of me that didn't break that night. The version that stood up and said, enough. If you've ever sat at a table where you felt invisible, where someone made you feel small, where you swallowed your words just to keep the peace, then you know what it takes to finally speak up. And if you've ever had someone stand up for you when you couldn't stand up for yourself, then you know how much that moment can change everything. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had to set a boundary with family? How did it go? You don't even belong here. Those words kept echoing in my head for days after that New Year's Eve dinner. Even though we'd left, even though Derek had defended me, even though his grandmother had stood up and called out the cruelty, I couldn't stop replaying it. The way she said it, the way she looked at me when she said it. Like I was nothing. Like I was an inconvenience she'd been tolerating for 3 years and finally couldn't stand anymore. The morning after we left her house, I woke up feeling different. Not broken, not defeated, just done. Done trying to win her over. Done making excuses for her behavior. Done pretending that her little comments didn't cut deep. I'd spent 3 years bending myself into shapes I didn't recognize, trying to be the daughter-in-law she wanted, and it was never going to be enough, because the problem was never me. It was her. And I finally understood that. Derek was still asleep next to me, his arm draped over my stomach where our baby was growing. I put my hand over his and thought about what kind of mother I wanted to be. I thought about the kind of grandmother I hoped my child would have. And I knew, without a doubt, that if Linda couldn't change, if she couldn't learn to treat me with basic human respect, then she wouldn't get to be part of our child's life. I wasn't going to let my baby grow up watching their grandmother tear their mother down. I wasn't going to model that kind of relationship for them. Some cycles needed to be broken, and this was mine to break. When Derek woke up, we talked for hours. Really talked. About boundaries. About what we were willing to accept and what we weren't. About the fact that family doesn't get a free pass to hurt you just because they're blood. He felt guilty. I could see it in his eyes. Guilty for not protecting me sooner. Guilty for all the times he'd asked me to let it go. To give her time. To be patient. I told him I didn't blame him. I knew he was caught in the middle. I knew he loved his mother even though she made it so hard. But I also told him that things had to change. That I needed him to keep standing up for me. Even when it was uncomfortable. Even when it caused problems. He promised he would. And for the first time, I believed him. The texts from Linda started coming in around noon. Short at first. Can we talk? Then longer. I didn't mean it the way it sounded. Then defensive. You're being dramatic. I was just joking. Derek didn't respond. He showed me each one, asked me what I thought, and then put his phone down. We agreed we needed space. Real space. Not a few days. Weeks, maybe months. However long it took for her to understand that this wasn't something she could smooth over with a half-hearted apology and then go right back to treating me like garbage. His sisters called too. The older one, Jessica, was sympathetic. She said she'd seen how their mom treated me and that she was sorry she never said anything. She admitted that Linda had always been controlling, that she'd driven away Jessica's first boyfriend because he wasn't good enough in her eyes, that she had a pattern of trying to hold on too tight and pushing people away in the process. The younger sister, Amanda, was more conflicted. She kept saying, "Mom's not a bad person, she just has a hard time with change." I didn't argue with her. I just said that whether she was a bad person or not didn't change the fact that her behavior was unacceptable. Amanda didn't know what to say to that. But the person who surprised me most was Derek's dad, Richard. He called Derek directly, not to defend Linda, but to apologize. He said he'd watched her treat me poorly for years and he'd never stepped in because he'd learned a long time ago that it was easier to let her have her way than to fight her. He said he was ashamed of himself, that he should have said something, that he should have protected me the way a father-in-law should. Derek told him it wasn't too late to start. Richard said he'd try. Margaret called me every few days just to check in. She'd ask how I was feeling, how the pregnancy was going, if I needed anything. She never brought up Linda unless I did first. She just showed me what real family was supposed to look like. Supportive, kind, present without being invasive. One afternoon, she came over with a box of her old baby clothes, things she'd saved from when her kids were little. She said she wanted our baby to have them. When I started crying, she just held me and said, "You're going to be a wonderful mother. Don't let anyone make you doubt that." 2 weeks after New Year's, Linda showed up at our apartment again. This time, Derek wasn't home. He was at work, and I was alone. When I saw her through the peephole, my first instinct was to not answer. But then I thought, no, I'm not hiding in my own home. I'm not the one who should be ashamed. So I opened the door, but I didn't invite her in. I just stood there waiting for her to speak. She looked different, smaller somehow. Her eyes were red like she'd been crying. She said, "Can I come in, please?" I thought about it for a moment, then stepped aside. She walked in slowly, looking around like she was seeing the place for the first time. She sat down on the edge of the couch, her hands folded in her lap, and for a long time she didn't say anything. I didn't help her. I didn't fill the silence. I just waited. Finally, she spoke. "I've been thinking a lot about what my mother said, about how I've become someone she doesn't recognize. And I think she's right." Her voice was quiet, shaky. "I don't know when it happened. When I turned into this person who says cruel things and justifies them as jokes. When I started seeing you as a threat instead of as someone my son loves." She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry, Maya. I'm really, truly sorry. Not because my mother shamed me in front of everyone. Not because Derek won't talk to me, but because I hurt you. Over and over again. And you didn't deserve any of it." I wanted to believe her. Part of me wanted to just accept the apology and move on, to make things easier for everyone. But I'd spent 3 years making things easier, and where had it gotten me? So instead I said, "Why did you hate me so much?" She flinched at the word hate, but she didn't deny it. She took a deep breath and said, "I didn't hate you. I was afraid of you. Afraid that you'd take him away from me. Afraid that I wouldn't matter anymore. Derek is my youngest, my baby. And when he brought you home so confident, so sure that you were the one, I felt like I was losing him. So I tried to find reasons why you weren't good enough. I picked you apart because if I could convince him you were wrong for him, then maybe he'd come back to me." I sat down across from her and said, "But he was never yours to lose, Linda. He's a grown man. He's not a child. And loving me doesn't mean he loves you less. It just means his life is bigger now, big enough for both of us. But you made it a competition. And you made me the enemy. And now you've hurt him too. Because every time you hurt me, you hurt him." She nodded, wiping her face with her hands. I know that now. And I don't know how to fix it." I thought about what I wanted to say next. I thought about Margaret's words, about how some people hurt others because they're afraid of being replaced. I thought about the baby growing inside me, about how one day I'd have to let go too. I thought about grace and boundaries and what it means to really forgive someone. And then I said, "You fix it by changing. Not just saying you'll change, but actually doing it. That means no more comments about my cooking, my clothes, my job, my anything. It means respecting our space and our decisions. It means asking before you come over. It means treating me like a person, not like an obstacle. And it means understanding that if you ever speak to me like that again, you won't just lose Derek. You'll lose your grandchild too. Because I will not let my baby grow up thinking it's okay to treat people that way." She looked at me with something I'd never seen before. Respect. Maybe even a little fear. But not the kind of fear that comes from being threatened. The kind that comes from finally understanding consequences. She said, "I understand, and I'll do better. I promise I will." I didn't say anything. Promises were easy. I needed to see action. She stood up to leave, and before she walked out the door, she turned back and said, "You're stronger than I ever gave you credit for. Derek chose well." It wasn't much, but it was more than she'd ever given me before. Over the next month, Linda did try. She texted before coming over. She asked about my day. She stopped making comments about the way I did things. When she came for dinner, she complimented the food. When I showed her the nursery we were setting up, she offered to help instead of criticizing. It was awkward at first, stiff, like we were strangers learning how to be around each other. But it was better than before, better than the constant tension, the constant bracing for the next insult. Derek noticed too. He said his mom seemed different, quieter, more thoughtful. He asked me if I thought she'd really changed, or if she was just pretending until things blew over. I told him I didn't know yet. That time would tell, that I was willing to give her a chance, but that I wasn't going to forget what happened. He understood. He said he wasn't going to forget either. Margaret hosted a small family lunch in February, and Linda was there. It was the first time we'd all been together since New Year's. I was nervous walking in, but Derek held my hand and reminded me that I didn't have to perform for anyone. I could just be myself. When we sat down at the table, Linda was sitting across from me. She smiled, a real smile, not the fake one I was used to. She asked how I was feeling, if the morning sickness had gotten better, if we'd picked out any names yet. Normal questions, kind questions, the kind a mother-in-law should ask. During lunch, Jessica made a comment about how much food I was eating, saying I was eating for two now. Before I could respond, Linda spoke up. She said, "Let her eat whatever she wants. Pregnancy is hard enough without people commenting on everything." Everyone looked at her, surprised. I was surprised too. It was a small moment, but it meant something. It meant she was trying. It meant she was choosing to defend me instead of tear me down. After lunch, Margaret pulled me aside. She said, "I see the change in her. I don't know if it'll last, but I see it." I told her I saw it too, but that I was still cautious. She nodded and said, "Good. Don't let your guard down too fast. Real change takes time, but I'm proud of you for giving her the chance." I hugged her tight and thanked her for being the kind of family I'd always hoped for. As my pregnancy progressed, Linda became more involved, but in a healthy way. She'd offer help but respect when I said no. She'd give advice but not push when I chose to do things differently. She started bringing over meals once a week, real home-cooked meals, the kind Derek grew up with. She'd stay for a little while, chat, and then leave without overstaying her welcome. It was strange, this new version of her, but it was also a relief. One evening, about a month before my due date, Linda came over with a gift. It was a baby blanket, hand-knitted, soft, and blue. She said she'd made it herself, that she'd been working on it for weeks. She said, "I know I can't take back the past 3 years. I know I hurt you in ways that words can't fix. But I want you to know that I'm grateful you didn't give up on this family, that you gave me a chance to be better. And I want to be a good grandmother. I want to be someone your child is proud to know." I took the blanket, feeling the weight of it in my hands, and I said, "Thank you, Linda. That means a lot." When our son was born in late April, Linda was one of the first people to meet him. She held him so carefully, like he was the most precious thing in the world, and she cried. She looked at me and said, "He's perfect. You did so good, Maya." It was the first time she'd ever said my name with warmth, the first time she'd acknowledged me as a mother. And in that moment, standing in that hospital room with my son in her arms and Derek by my side, I felt something shift. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the beginning of it, the possibility of it. Things aren't perfect now. We still have our moments. There are still times when Linda says something that rubs me the wrong way, times when I have to remind her of boundaries. But it's different now. She listens. She apologizes when she's wrong. She tries. And that's all I ever really wanted. Not perfection, just effort, just respect, just the acknowledgement that I matter. Derek's grandmother was right. Sometimes the people who hurt us the most are the ones who are most afraid. Afraid of change, afraid of losing control, afraid of being forgotten. Linda was all of those things, and maybe in some small way so was I. Afraid that I'd never be enough, afraid that I'd always be an outsider, afraid that standing up for myself would cost me everything. But it didn't. It gave me everything. It gave me my voice back. It gave me my power back. It gave me a family that finally sees me. If you've ever been told you don't belong, if you've ever been made to feel small, if you've ever swallowed your pain just to keep the peace, I want you to know that you deserve better. You deserve to be seen. You deserve to be heard. You deserve to take up space without apologizing for it. And if someone can't give you that, then they don't deserve access to you. Not your time, not your energy, not your presence. Because belonging isn't something someone else gets to decide for you. It's something you claim for yourself. Tell me, have you ever had to stand up to family? Have you ever drawn a line and refused to cross it? How did it change things? I'd love to hear your story.